here we are. So I welcome to the stage Victor and Luke, who I will let them introduce themselves shortly. But we're going to go into the next level, social commerce, and hear the many layers you both go through. So I'll pass it to Victor just to do a little intro for yourself.
Sure. My name is Victor. I work for Amazon. Specifically, I run the Twitch Brand Partnership Studio, which is a content studio that focuses on anything custom on Twitch with brands. So think of it, just we produce thousands of hours of content a year, and we also produce a lot of the in-house tech that powers our interactivity. If you don't know what Twitch is, it's a live stream service. We have millions of creators and millions of people come every day to watch people play games, do music, create art, cook, etc., anything, you name it. So that's it.
Thank you. Luke, what do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Luke. I work over at Google in the Devices and Services team. What I'm specifically a part of is our COE, which is Social Influencer and Paid Media. So a lot of the big things that we go through and do is how do you interact with influencers, social media, and all that jazz. I specifically focus on benchmarking in social commerce. So in doing any type of activation, is it working is a big question that always comes up when people talk to me. It's building out those parameters, making sure we are hitting our overarching goals. How do we get there? And then from a social commerce standpoint, we then go through and build out how we interacting with consumers on social media through influencers with paid media to really drive people to go through and convert and make sales.
There we go. And so now, focusing on 2024 and the commerce landscape, what are you seeing playing out so far and some trends you're currently excited about?
I'll defer to you first. I feel like you're more an expert than I am in this.
Interesting trend. So it's been really interesting building out our social commerce platform, because when you look at anything like we have TikTok Shop, Instagram Shop, things within those spaces, and I think those are definitely trending in when you look at Gen Z. When we look at people going through and purchasing, the best way to kind of think about it, in that $50 to $150 price range, people are like, yeah, I'll buy that tank top or that blouse or that thing. So the shops tend to be doing pretty well across the board, but when you start running into a product that, say, a new cell phone that costs $800, you're gonna look at that and be like, haha, I'm not gonna go through and purchase that there. So a lot of the things that we're going through and looking at is how do you go through and build out messaging on a concurrent basis that gets people excited about what's happening. Should I actually consider your product? And this is where it comes in on a much deeper level where we have to really look at frequency on an ongoing standpoint of like, how do we go through and do that? I think what the last panel was talking about in partnerships is a really big thing that we look at too. When you look at Gen Z, we're seeing a lot of excitement when there is those limited releases, people where they have a partnership and they're gonna go through and do something with a brand. So we look at a lot of things like that. And then it's honestly just that attribution from influencers, people talking about it, being excited about it, but why are you excited about it? I think one of the biggest things that we're starting to see within influencers specifically is when someone goes through and they're like, oh my God, look at the product, it's great. Like, you've never used that product before, we're all aware of it. So it's really coming down to them being like, this is the product, this is why I use it. If you're not hitting on that why, people aren't gonna really go into that consideration of should I go through and do it. And I will say an interesting trend that I keep seeing on TikTok, all of those ads that are driving into TikTok Shop, it's always like, I'm using the horrible reference that I always get because it's a tank top. They're like, yeah, look at my tank top, it fits so well. Look, it doesn't stretch out once I'm done using it. And I'm immediately like, oh my God, that's what I want when I go to the gym, that's great. So leaning into those different use cases and those benefits that you get as a consumer is really becoming a prominent thing that we're seeing across the board.
Victor, what are you seeing?
I guess I can talk about it from the creator side. So, you know, on Twitch and a lot of other spaces, beyond the sort of ad formats and products and ways that you can kind of get to a consumer, we like to really think about our creators as brands themselves. So when you're thinking about partnering with a creator or when you're just looking at the landscape, a lot of Luke's points are really valid in terms of the authenticity of what you're talking about and the products that you're trying to align with in terms of a creator that you're working with. So, you know, like a really good example is Will Neff, who was one of our Twitch streamers. He just partnered with a hot sauce brand to sell out a hot sauce in like 5 seconds. They broke the website. And that's something that actually happens kind of often on Twitch because it's a live event. So when you're getting a lot of people, thousands of people to do something at the same time, it can have a really big impact. In this case, Will was like, I'm going to basically just lend my name out to this hot sauce brand, we'll create a collaborative sort of like limited edition product drop together, and then we'll sell that out. And so while that's a very sort of fast-moving, sort of on-demand type of approach, it's extremely coherent with the rest of what Twitch does, which is like drops in terms of how they do commerce and how they do subscriptions and how they do gameplay. Like, it's a very gamified experience. And so for us on Twitch, at least, that's kind of how we think about commerce, in the way of you have a creator, they're their own brand, how are they collaborating with brands and their products in the space and sort of driving an outcome.
And you pointed out like the word authenticity. It was a big word used last year, and I feel like now what's great is it's no longer a buzzword, it's just what it needs to be. And so going and focusing on challenges that brands are currently having, what are some that stand out to you in social commerce?
I have a specific call out per what Victor just said, and I have a question for Victor, actually. So you gave the example of this live commerce brand on Twitch, and it performed really well. I think one of the interesting spaces is so many brands are trying to figure out live commerce. What was a learning that you guys took away in seeing that kind of happen? Because I would say immediate challenge that my team goes through and deals with is everyone's like, use live commerce, it's the best thing ever. What did you guys see, and like, what was the benefit in doing that?
Yeah, so it's live commerce is really tough. Like, I know we get into it a little bit later, but Twitch is not an inherently place like where people go to shop. We're not QVC, but in that case with Will, and then a couple other cases where we produce an original shopping show called PogPix. The key has been to really focus on tactically getting to like a solve of like, it's a product, it's limited edition, it's a drop. It also is like really tied to the creator, like they're really, really involved in it, either a name and likeness, or it's something that they use every day, or something that you've seen them use every day, so it's authentic to their persona. And then to your point, like keeping the price point reasonable in terms of what we're selling and what we're pushing, or giving an additional benefit. So like we do a lot with Amazon in terms of like rewarded ads, so benefiting the consumer with some sort of discount or reward that's unlocked through a gamification on a Twitch stream. So like if I'm on a Twitch stream and I can start to see like little pop-ups and I can kind of like pop those bubbles, and then all of a sudden it unlocks a $5 off gift card for NYX products or something like that, or makeup. We see that kind of drives a lot of intent and traffic the most. It's hard to scale though. So like the Will Neff example is like one hot sauce with one streamer, and it's like a very concentrated thing. I think our challenge right now is to how to broaden that out to be like, I can develop a habit for more people to really engage with like a commerce-led solution. So it's a challenge, but we're working on it.
Any other thoughts that get sparked from that?
Ooh. So I think another challenge that we kind of go through and deal with is, it's kind of interesting to go through and say, when we say social media now, one of the big things is that really encompasses a little bit of everything. So the big challenge, one, is talking to leadership teams and making them understand what does social media actually mean, which I am assuming everyone in this room has had some sort of experience with, of explaining to an older individual, what is social media, how does it work? We watch Congress and we can all tell that's very much a thing. But I think the other side of it is going through and putting together a strategy where you are looking at what needs to be my own social channel. What do I need to do there? What do I need to go through and do on influencer? How do those things tie together? So we spend a lot of time when we're going through and doing like a partnership. What are those key touch points? How do those different layers come together? Because realistically, when you're doing an overarching campaign with, let's say, a product launch, you really have to have those components in play to go through and get someone excited, being aware of what your product is and what's happening within the space. So a big challenge for us is determining what is the best thing, what do we go through and do, and that's when really heavily a lot of the benchmarking that I go through and put into play comes into huge consideration, determining where you need to go through and put in assets and challenges to go through and get consumers excited.
I'm about to leap into a pretty on our kickoff call, we went into privacy quite a bit, and just talking about these different user experiences, and they are leaping and going into different spaces, and so to go into what current privacy measures that are affecting your work and the look ahead for this year. I'm happy for either one. I don't want to whatever's sparking. Luke.
Yeah.
So Google has a very interesting stance on privacy, which is kind of how this has come up within the digital space. So what Sundar, the CEO of Google, has come forward and says, we're never going to share out data from another partner. And what that essentially means is when we're going through and doing any type of ad campaign, say I want to buy paid media, there's actually specific paid media that you can go through and purchase that has pixels that the ad goes through and then can help you get conversions. Because of the stance on how we go through and deal with privacy from an e-commerce standpoint, we can't do those types of advertising. So a lot of the different ways that we have to go through and approach how we're going to go through and bring people into our pages and try and go through and purchase things is a lot more in this mid-funnel area of interesting content that gets you super excited, instead of that hammering of like, buy product now, hit this link, it's going to go through, you're going to get this, because that's very much what those different paid media assets are used for. So what we are kind of challenged with is making sure that we have enough things that are exciting enough to give you that reason to go through and actually click through, want to learn more, and be more in that space.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of funny because sort of privacy and that type of, I would say, like, discipline and theme doesn't really come up as much with my group because we are just producing the content. I will say from an Amazon standpoint, obviously we always like to think of things as an opportunity for customers, so having the ability to have all these signals in place with Amazon as our backing in terms of either through our ad server or through the signals that we drive when we're sending people to Amazon. Once you're in that sort of Amazon world, it's a really compelling offering for a lot of brands, but I can't really necessarily comment to like privacy around that. But I've taken the trainings, there's a lot of them internally, and I know what we don't do, which is we don't share data with third parties, and we protect it very, very seriously.
Well, I think we can all trust that you got it. But I think leaping into what your sort of your expertise and that behavior, the journey, how do you create that within your ecosystem, and how does your brand essentially put in thoughts around social commerce with it?
Yeah, it's going back to something Luke said, which is what's really a challenge for brands, if I'm going to like meld that into the last question, is there's a lot of cutting corners. So it's a lot of like, okay, I'm on Twitch or I'm on something within our Amazon world, and if there's not enough contemplating of like what it is to kind of be part of that journey and really get the outcome I want, it's a little bit, there's a lot of questions around like, okay, if I do a Twitch stream, is it going to drive sales? And it's like, there's like several different things in the middle that have to happen in order for you to have a successful outcome. And we never pretend that we're necessarily going to drive lower funnel. We're like really upper and mid funnel in terms of how we approach our business and content. But there is a benefiting side like piece to this, which is like we do drive traffic to places when we have meaningful like programs. And it's a whole kind of sort of, I would say, theme around the walls of Amazon, which is like a content to commerce play, but it starts with that content piece first. Yeah. So for us, it's like really educating people and the brands on like how Twitch works, what it means to be on Twitch, and then like once you kind of get that and there's a light switch, there's actually a ton of different things that we can use to affect, whether it's commerce, whether it's just driving intent or lift. It's kind of it's a really interesting place to be. It's just there is a little bit of a barrier initially to kind of thinking about how a brand shows up on Twitch and like, can they do it properly and why? Yeah.
You focus on the user and your brand, which I think is fabulous. A lot of people get lost in the commerce and sort of the monetary values involved. So the next question points to nurturing. And Luke, you hinted towards that higher ticket phone and the expensive items and converting a customer on that. So how do you go about it? How do you nurture those relationships from new customer to existing? We use it all the time in conversations, but like how do you truly differentiate new versus existing, and how do you separate the marketing for that on social commerce?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting way to kind of look at everything. And what we have to go through and do, and looking at like an ongoing consumer journey, for most brands, when you are dealing with a low ticket item, it's kind of like, here's my ad, purchase, do it now. When you start getting to those higher ticket items, so let's think cars, phones, computers, anything that costs, let's say, above $500, you really have to start thinking about I need to start giving you ongoing messaging that you're going to keep seeing and being like, wait, do I like that new feature? Would that be helpful to me? Would this be a thing? And I think that's the interesting side within a tech space, especially from a product standpoint. It's just going through and having that understanding of building out content. So what we essentially do is we have a lot of content that's like, we have our big campaign. So think of a product launch. Oh my God, look, there's a new product. Then it's going through and us being like, look at this feature, look at this thing that's gone through and happened. And one of the things that we do on an ongoing basis at Google is we have feature drops. So about every 3 months, we launch new features that you can have specifically on your Google Pixel phone. And those features can be a wide array of different things. So it gives you beats. So you can go through and be like, oh, we're going through, this is a cool thing that it goes through and does. So a great example to do, we did a product launch, then we came out Gemini, which is our AI that we incorporated into our phones. So now all Google Pixel phones have Gemini, so we have AI. You can go through and write out, oh my God, look, I need to ask 3 questions to insert person. What should those be? They'll give you the questions. Fast forward the next couple of months, we have a feature drop of Google Search Circle to Search. This is a really cool new feature where, say you're out and you have this person that's walking down the street and you're like, oh my God, I love that blouse. You take a picture of them, circle it, and it will drive to where you can actually go through and purchase. So it's us creating the content so you can then see the different use cases, the different ways you can go through and incorporate it in and get people excited about that. Because what we can go through and determine, when you look at phones and us going through and switching, it's about a 1 to 2 year time frame for anyone once they get a phone now to go through and switch. So it's us going through and finding those beats and making sure that you know this thing is coming, go through and try this thing. And we're in the process of going through and building out how to make that more of a better ongoing space and how we go through and really bring consumers through it. Because like I said, when we get to that conversion standpoint, it's, we can't target you and be like, here it is now, the phone is on sale for $6.99 instead of $8.99. So it's us going through and being very conscious of what that messaging is on an ongoing beat basis. And then you being like, wait, I need a new phone today. Maybe I should try that phone. That makes sense. So yeah.
And talking about that life cycle, I did want to, is that something sort of thought out in your role, Victor? I know Twitch being different in this social environment, but is it part of your process in developing this with brands?
Yeah, I mean, where I sit is probably a little more sort of tangible and tactical. So like, if I were to draft off of what Luke was saying, like, for us, you know, in terms of what we're doing and how we're offering things, you could have a QSR who only has LTOs. They don't really necessarily think about like a long-term master brand plan, not necessarily with us, but from an activation standpoint, they'll say, okay, I have 15 LTOs across the year, I gotta hit those, what do I do? And so, for instance, like for Taco Bell, like we have a big partnership with them where we actually sustain like long-term brand partnerships with those specific streamers once they hit new partner. And so like it's their first time getting sponsored, it's the first time their community is kind of being sort of like showcasing a brand to their community. And then also from that point on, they're gonna consistently be able to pump out an LTO for breakfast items for the next like 6 months or 8 months. And so like when I think about like sustaining and like where we are in the creator space, that's a lot of brands come to us either from a heavy up like stunt standpoint, or they're actually like invested in some of these streamers because they know that those communities will come to bat for them with every sort of like new launch or new thing, but there's always on like a consistent sort of presence because they're sponsoring a streamer long term. So it's kind of, it floats a lot of different ways, but I wouldn't pretend to say that like we are like a massive part of the like entire life cycle, but we do show up as a tactical piece of it.
And do you help sort of brands match with certain streamers, or do you find brands come to you and are making that request?
So we have a whole talent department on my team that all they do all day long is surface new streamers, because one of our key goals as a team is just to surface new streamers, new talent. We do all the matchmaking sort of by hand. There's a lot of, I would say, automated sort of talent databases out there, but for us, it's really about that like human touch, because it goes into brand safety, which is a really, really important piece for us in terms of making sure that the streamers and everything is vetted appropriately and there's a good fit there. But we try to make sure we control that whole outreach piece, the procurement of talent. There are a lot of brands, and we're encouraging brands to do more directly with streamers anyways. We have a lot of ad products that kind of like deliver on that message, and we have a lot of people that come in with their own streamers and they say, hey, can we work on an activation together and do something creative? And that's something that we entertain all the time. It's encouraging because our Twitch streamers are very specific and they're a little bit different in that a lot of them are grinding 6 to 8 hours a day. So it's a different type of creator that they're tuning into, but it's a mix of both.
Awesome. And Luke, Google does their own collaborations as well. Anything sparked from like Victor's point of view and that perspective from Twitch that you could add to?
From like finding influencers?
Yeah.
So I think it's a really interesting realm. A lot of what Victor said, it's basically like dating. You go through, you swipe through all the profiles, you're like, do I like this one? And then you match, and then you have your best friends go through and look at the photos too, and you're like, do we like them? Should we go through and partner with them? Those friends are legal, brand safety, and all of those other teams, and they give the POV. But I think the interesting side of it is finding the right influencer is very much like dating. It's finding the right person that's going to be able to communicate the message that you want to from a corporate standpoint. How does that kind of come together? And then just kind of focusing in on building those partnerships. A lot of the time, I think the big thing that isn't necessarily said to a lot of creators is your first approach is you being a test. It's like, do we like you? It's date one. It's like, can you do the thing that we like? Is it gonna go through and work? Do we wanna continue doing this? So you do that, they post based on performance, that's more like, oh, I like you, I think we should do this again. And then you start getting to the bigger conversations of like, do we have ongoing partnerships? What do those things look like? Because I think the big thing in looking at any type of performance now for marketing, especially now, is it working? And that's where measurement is really coming into play. So it's us being able to point back to things and say, yes, comparatively, based on these things, we think this person should be kept around because they're doing X, Y, and Z.
Going right into the measurement question, I'm losing track on everything. But I wanted to, Victor, it's like measurement on your side and what you're held to, if you could share your experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up all the time in various different ways, but because how we position our team and like our creative and what we do, again, it goes back to being upper funnel and mid funnel. So for us, a lot of the things we look at, there's a couple things. So one is from a general brand lift perspective, that's key because as a creative group, you want to sort of show that like you're driving the brand forward, you're driving intent and uplift and all that kind of stuff. We do track engagement, obviously. We want to look at chatter, we want to look at sentiment. We want to really provide those types of pieces of data to brands. Internally, we have a lot of like sort of internal KPIs that tell us, is this stream even working? So like amongst all the streams on a benchmark level, are we doing great with viewership? Are we doing great with engagement? And then is this stream literally like we have like proprietary like internal metrics that just say, is this stream like good? And it's from a lot of quantitative things around engagement, but like we know that like when we're hitting above a 1.0, which is like the kind of the standard baseline, we know that our creative is doing well. And then that in turn, when you really think about why brands are coming to us, it's because of the content. So it's like if I can prove to you that our content is working extremely well, even above a Twitch benchmark, there's value in that for a brand to adhere to it and sponsor it and align with it and like integrate into it because you have the best captive, most engaged audience we have.
Yeah. And we're going to be going to like Q&A, but I really don't want to, we've gone through all the questions that we sort of prepped for, but I don't want to turn it over yet unless you think anything's missing from this conversation, something you really want people to take away from what you both sort of experience within each of your company in social commerce and some of your words of advice and importance to take away.
So I think one of the big things is measurement. I think one of the hard things in our space in any type of marketing, sales, anything you go through and do, the marketing side is very much in a nebulous space for a lot of different companies where they don't have defined realms of benchmarking. This is what is good performance. This is what you need to go through and do. I think if there's any guidance that I can give anyone in anything to go through and do in the marketing realm is if you send benchmarks that you're trying to beat and you can showcase it to everyone, it changes the game. And I think it's a really big thing to be aware of in any type of marketing that you're going through and doing. So what I've gone through and done at almost every company that I've joined is I come in and I set our overarching benchmarks, and then it's beating those things. So I align with overarching teams, make sure everyone's aware of what we're trying to go through and hit, and then I go through and do that. The interesting side of this is within a business ecosystem, you can do this at any level that you're starting out with. Traditionally speaking, your boss should go through and define and be like, okay, we're doing marketing, I want impressions, go for the impressions. The further along that we get it within this, measurement has become so many different metrics. Basically, you go through and you share the report that's going to make you look the best. The hard thing is what you start running into from a leadership standpoint is if you've come to me one quarter and you've told me, oh my God, look, we did this campaign that had the most impressions ever. Cool, that's great. Next quarter, you come to like, oh my God, it was the best campaign ever. We got a lot of engagements. They're gonna start being like, wait, but last quarter you said impressions. This quarter you said engagements. Next quarter you're saying clicks. What do we actually care about? So when you hold yourself accountable and you have something that you're set and you're working towards, that will really put you above everyone else that you're working against. So definitely make sure that whatever capacity you're going through and doing, set that parameter, align with your teams and be like, hey, we're managing influencers. I wanna make sure we're getting clicks. Right now it looks like we're getting this much. My goal is to increase clicks by 3%. Always give yourself a low number, it's easy. Like, give yourself that low number and then they're gonna be like, wait, you got 7% increase in clicks? And I'm like, yeah, I did. Now you need to give me that raise. The good thing is from a measurement standpoint, and this is where we're going in much deeper, from an employment standpoint long-term, when that's on your resume, that's the thing people understand. They understand that you increased it by 7%. So it's something that I definitely call out to everyone in any type of space. From a commerce standpoint, everyone looks at the numbers, which is why it's a great thing to kind of lean into, but you can do it in any type of marketing across the board, and going through and building out that space protects you, and it also gives you substantiation to move on to other places that any employer would be very excited to bring you on board, because you can literally say, I increased clicks, impressions, views, whatever that benchmark versus goal was, that is then makes them realize you can do the job that I want to hire you for.
Yeah, and I think for us, for us, it's a very existential question of like, where does creative fit into any, like, I would say more advanced type of discussion around performance and marketing and all that kind of stuff. And it's something we wrestle with a lot. I think what my group is really trying to figure out is there's sort of the culture and creative and always really trying to understand like what it's a youth marketing summit. So like what youth culture is trying to do and like where they are and the trends that we're seeing from a content standpoint, and then figuring out, okay, well, if people don't come to Twitch to shop, maybe we have to reframe exactly what we're talking about in terms of shopping, and then talk about like, okay, what does a broader commerce play look like, and then start to test and like test again. Like that's so important for us. We have the benefit of having a team and like Amazon is like sort of like a large company that you can do a lot of things in, but like it's not easy. So when brands come to us and say live commerce, they're like, oh, Twitch, like we can figure out how to do something on Twitch, and it's like, well, it's not that easy, but we are building tools to enable that experience, and then we have to really make sure that the content makes sense. And we're not there yet. Like that's the good thing about it, but like it's a huge priority for us in terms of trying to get there.
I feel like we've covered so much. There's got to be a lot of, yep, I see. Well, a colleague, oh, okay, great. I didn't know if I was going to have to run. Front row.
Hi, how are you guys? It's so nice to meet you both. My name's Isabel. I work at Hunter. It's a public relations firm. I'm actually one of Amazon. I work for Amazon Retail, so it's really nice to talk to you both. I am also 22 years old, so I am a Gen Z-er. And one of the problems I would say I have with my generation, and I only really know this from just like going through and doing so many research on like trends and insights and kind of realizing that we are all about sustainability. However, we tend to, as you said, when we see an influencer talk about deals or talk about something that's really low price, lean into these non-sustainable issues, but then we'll call out these big corporations for not being sustainable. One thing that I just kind of realized from doing research and trying to find the solution is you actually will be spending less money if you buy a more luxurious product because it will last longer. And I feel like there are a lot of influencers that are so partnering with brands and they're talking all about how it's cheaper instead of being nicer and more sustainable and kind of making better use of the money that we have. When I first started working and first got a job, I was like, I'm gonna be the cheapest I possibly can. And now it's like I'm saving up for these nicer products that are lasting me a lot longer, and I'm finding them on Amazon because my job is in Amazon retail. I'm looking at all of the products that are like nice and
Thank you for
sustainable.
supporting us.
Yeah, of course. So I just wanted to know, when you guys are looking at influencers, are you guys seeing this problem with sustainability? And are you are you realizing that they want to be advertising things because they're on deal or because of the product themselves? And also, like, there are a lot of niche influencers that talk about sustainability. Have either of you ever considered partnering with them?
I mean, on Twitch, we have a lot of streamers who sustainability is first and foremost one of their core tenets. So the Twitch streamer Maya just started a stream series maybe a month ago called Maya Saves the World, and she just goes to local businesses in her area in LA, and then she like previews like they're all sustainably led in terms of like how they do their business practices and stuff like that. So she spends 3, 4, or 5 hours talking to them about all the practices, what they do, hanging out. And we actually do find that a lot of brands who come to us from an advertising standpoint, like we actually really think about that piece because, for instance, like Chevron, which is a gas company, sponsors TwitchCon. I can't tell you how many internal conversations we had debating back and forth about the positioning of Chevron being at TwitchCon because sustainability is a huge deal. And it's no knock on Chevron. Like we accepted them as a sponsor, but it's something that is talked through quite heavily. And we do have brand deals that we will bring to people, streamers, and in terms of recommendations, and they will reject it. They'll say, it's not part of me, it's not authentic to me, and I don't like, the practices they did 2 years ago when I was reading in the press that, they source some of their materials from non-sustainable areas or whatever it is. So it actually is like a huge presence within like our discussions, but a lot of brands that we work with also are not necessarily like quick sort of cheap things, like we push to Amazon to sell against like lower priced items sometimes, but most of the brands that come to us are looking for real brand lift that are car companies, they're bigger deals, and I think that's where we're the short answer is yes, we think about that actually quite a lot.
So I have a very interesting use case per your question. One of the companies that I used to work at was called Logitech. So gaming, mice, keyboards, all the fun stuff. And I think the immediate thing that kind of comes into play in asking about anything sustainable is, does the company create products that are sustainable? So especially within the tech space, there's so many ways to kind of look at sustainability, and what Logitech had to go through and do from any of these standpoints was, we cannot say we're sustainable unless we can actually rationalize it and say it to you in every possible way, because it's become such a large conversation on sustainability. It's really easy to poke holes in things. So it had to be a very ironclad stance for us to go through and do. And from a tech standpoint, that makes partnering with specific influencers a little difficult. Per your tiering question, I think it really comes down to the brand. When you look at Logitech, what they went through and did as a result of the sustainability question is, if we're looking at quality of products, every type of brand and company has the ability to have like a tiering system. I think looking at, Old Navy, Gap to Banana Republic, I think is the 3 tiering. Each one progressively gets better. So within that space, it's then finding the partnerships, and they create these ecosystems where it's going to tierings of individuals instead of focusing on that sustainability element. Whereas from a brand standpoint, you can't say you're sustainable unless you can fully support it, which is where I think it really comes into play of, do we partner with these people? Because if we do and they say things, we have to be able to actually substantiate it. And I think in a lot of spaces, it's, can the company actually do that? And that then becomes a much larger conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also like when you're talking about like actually becoming a reality in terms of the content that we're streaming. So if you have a brand or a product that does sort of put sustainability as the forefront of what they're talking about or what they're about, you kind of also have to make sure that the community and the streamer like really understand that too, because sometimes they might say, well, like it might be something that's like really not tangible to them, and so like bringing that into a much clearer perspective in terms of why sustainability is even important for that community is another. It's not a challenge, but it's something that like we have to think through, because you can't just say sustainability and then people are either really smart and they like look that up, to Luke's point, and they'll find cracks in the system, or if you're really honest about it, like that's probably better than just sort of touting that, because like, I don't know, if you have a community filled with thousands of people, they're not all like coastal people, you know. There's a lot of different types of folks that come to stream on Twitch and come to watch Twitch, and so you have to really think about, how do I educate properly versus just kind of like saying you know, it's a token sustainability thing.
Awesome, thank you guys.
Hi, thank you all for sharing. And I would like to ask, now everybody's talking about retail media, and from Amazon Inspire, the short video on the app, and also from YouTube Shopping to TikTok Shop. And I'm wondering what's all of your perspective on this approach. For example, how can brands and creators adapt to these trends, and how can we balance tracking the metrics between engagement rate and the performance from a long-term perspective? Thank you.
So for us, what's really interesting is Twitch and Amazon are very separate companies, and my group kind of sits in between. So I work for Amazon, but I only focus on primarily Twitch. And you have to kind of lean back into what they consider commerce and what they consider like purchasing of things. So on Twitch, it's really a digital service. So everything's about subscriptions and bits and sort of supporting creators and streamers. So when we introduce things like, we have a overlay extension where you can kind of populate, as a producer, you can populate any Amazon ASIN and people can click to go buy. And so it's like, we tested that out over the last like 18 months and it's got mixed results. But it's partially because the content varies, and so it's been very hard for us to like get a really good baseline test. But what Amazon has been consistently coming out with is innovating for obviously any customer to make it way easier to buy things and way easier to, there's a frictionless purchasing sort of funnel. And so like part of our next step is to really drive that and see if we remove every barrier that there is to purchasing something and we marry that with the right content, like will it succeed or will it do something different? And so our long-term vision is like figuring that out. And again, I don't know if we'll get there, and that's okay, because there's plenty to do on Twitch that is not necessarily retail focused, but it's something that from an advertising and brand perspective, I need to think about, you know. So.
I agree.
Thank you so much.
Anything? You killed it. We covered so much. I thank you both for such a wonderful conversation. And big round of applause for you.
Thanks.